There were two moments that captured the impact and the strategy behind President Trump's address to Congress this week. We'll discuss both of them on this episode of Right Angle. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode, like all the others, is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com that make Right Angle possible. Gentlemen, I saw two moments that I think crystallized the way President Trump went about this speech, and not only his intention, but his strategic development process, the way he made this such an impactful moment in presidential speech making. Number one was when DJ Daniel, who is a 13-year-old boy who had been diagnosed with cancer in 2017 and whose lifetime dream was to become a police officer. The president pointed out that DJ had actually been made an honorary police officer by several police departments around the country. His proud father stood next to him wearing a red, white, and blue shirt and holding a cowboy hat in his hand. And then he said, and I'm paraphrasing, DJ, we'd like to pay you an even greater honor tonight. The new secretary or the new director of the Secret Service is with us, and he is going to make you a Secret Service agent. The dad picks up the boy, he was a rather small boy, picks him up as the director of the Secret Service, hands him this badge in a little wallet, you know, the kind they open and flash on TV shows. The child is stunned and thrilled. And while everybody is applauding, the child leans over and talks to the Secret Service director a couple times. No idea what he was saying, but as the dad was lowering DJ down, DJ reached over and embraced the director of the Secret Service and held on to him. And the Secret Service director held him too, in a prolonged, very intense emotional moment. So that was moment number one, Steve Green. Moment number two was when the widow and the daughters of Corey Comparator, who was the man who lost his life on the July 13th assassination attempt against President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they stood up when he recognized them and their father and husband's heroism in that moment and the tragic loss that family suffered. And they looked very kind of distraught, like they were still in mourning. And after they sat down, President Trump said this in the moments after that. And this went, Steve, a way that I could never have anticipated. He said, quote, "I was saved by God to make America great again." And they did a shot to the balcony, and the daughters and the wife of the man who was killed in the assassination attempt stood up and applauded. Steve Green, all the laundry list of details that the president rattled off about the amazing rapidity with which he has accomplished things in the first 43 days of his term cannot compete, nor can any Democratic refutation of those details with these two emotional moments. Am I right?
You are right. And to even come close to this, I have to go back to I think it was Ronald Reagan's first term in office. 60 Minutes wanted to do one of their 60 Minutes pieces on President Reagan. And the White House was very generous. Reagan, when they wanted to do this, was going to be at his ranch out in California. And they actually invited 60 Minutes to the ranch. You know, this is kind of his downtime. You know, the president's a very busy, very stressful job. And they invited the 60 Minutes crew. I think Mike Wallace did the segment. And of course, this being Mike Wallace and 60 Minutes, it was a hit piece. But there was a genius going on there in that by inviting the CBS 60 Minutes crew to the ranch, they took all of this great B-roll. And the B-roll is so good, you had to use it in the segment. And the B-roll is Ronald Reagan in his jeans riding a horse, looking great in the saddle. Ronald Reagan in the backyard with his axe and his big gloves on, chopping wood. And this was the B-roll. And after the segment ran, and by the way, as I recall, it was brutal. Whatever the words were that Mike Wallace was saying, it's just absolutely brutal to Reagan. Nonetheless, Reagan, I think it was his media guy, I can't remember his name now, called up Don Lewitt, whoever the head producer of 60 Minutes was, I was like a 13-year-old kid here, so you got to give my rusty memory a break here. Called the executive producer of 60 Minutes to thank him for this hit piece that they ran. It's like, what are you going? Wallace tore your guy apart. What are you talking about? And Reagan's guy said, all people are going to remember was seeing Reagan riding that horse and chopping that wood and mending that fence line. That's what they saw. They're not going to remember a damn thing, Mike Wallace said. And even me, with generally pretty good memory, I have no idea what Wallace said anymore. But I still remember Reagan doing all those cool Reagan things on his ranch, just being an amazing guy. Well, this wasn't quite that because it wasn't at a ranch. Donald Trump is not a ranch guy. He's a New York City guy. But what we saw in that hall last night, that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember the look on DJ's face. And by the way, I have to apologize to DJ. In my segment this week, I said they made him an honorary Secret Service agent. I was incorrect. They made him a Secret Service agent. Nothing honorary about it.
That was the language the president used.
Yes. But for the widow and the daughters to be there, when those wounds are still so fresh, people will remember their bravery and their gratitude, and they will remember the members of the other party who sat there in silence. They'll forget the words Trump said, just like they forget the words that Reagan and Mike Wallace said in that segment. But those images, we are a visual creature. That's what people will take home. That's going to cement some real love for a president that's found it very hard to earn affection outside of his core audience, and that's a great and powerful thing.
Bill Whittle, those two examples weren't the end of what President Trump did. I get the sense that Trump sat down with his advisors and speechwriters and said, listen, there's nothing worse than the dry as dust speeches that most presidents give before Congress. And I don't want to make a speech. I want to make a show. And I want to make it compelling and as visual as possible. The other moment that stood out to me was when he introduced a young man named Jason, who I think is just graduating high school. He pointed out the fact that he had lettered in like 6 sports, had a 4.46 grade point average, pretty bright guy, that he was the next generation of a series of men who had served in the U.S. military, and that he had lost his father, who was also a deputy sheriff, at a very young age. The guy's name was Jason. I didn't catch the last name on the first listen to the speech. And so he introduces him. He's up there and he says, and Jason's dream has always been to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, basically, and to go to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And so everybody's clapping for him and saying, what a great guy, and he's still willing to serve. And, he lost his dad, and yet he's willing to put his life on his line for the country. At which point, President Trump said these words, I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been accepted.
Oh, that's epic.
And it was just an unbelievable moment. And so, Bill, one of the things that struck me about this was how he constantly wove those visual pictures into the story. And then near the end of the speech, Bill, and I just want you to react to this. Near the end of the speech, he said this, and through it all, we are going to rediscover the unstoppable power of the American spirit, and we are going to renew the unlimited promise of the American dream. Every single day, we will stand up and we will fight, fight, fight for the country our citizens believe in and for the country our people deserve.
How do you add to that?
What do you think of the use of fight, fight, fight?
Well, that's when he won the election. I think he could have won it without it, but there's no question that that's when he won the election. That was Elon Musk endorsed him within an hour or two of that happening, and Joe Rogan said that's what changed his mind about him, and I know a lot of Americans felt that same way. Wow. But regardless of what of the Butler thing, what Donald Trump is doing here, when he said, "I don't want to give a speech, I want to tell a story," he has realized the key to political success, and it's something that very few presidents ever realize, and even fewer of them are able to achieve. Barack Obama had moments when he could get into. There have been moments, and forgive me for saying this, I just don't know how else to put it. There are moments when I've done a lot of public speaking, but there are moments when, if I'm really inspired, when the language comes out sounding like a silver trumpet, and if you can blow that silver trumpet, you will reduce people to tears. And as Steve pointed out, that's the thing that people remember. Donald Trump told a story that night, and the story that he told is that the government belongs to the people again. That's the recurring message of this. I think of all the things that I've seen in terms of optics, I'm hard pressed to think of anything that was more persuasive in terms of change, in terms of making an argument than the sight of seeing Donald Trump in the Oval Office surrounded by 30 young girls as he signed that executive order keeping trans men out of women's sports. He wasn't smelling their hair. It wasn't creepy. He looked like America's kindly grandfather. And to make the State of the Union address about the people of America and how we are returning the government back to the people to whom it belonged in the first place is not only brilliant political messaging, it's also an indication that he really gets it. I mean, this is why we're conservatives. This is what we believe. And I can't help but contrast these overwhelmingly positive emotions and these beautiful moments that take your breath away and move you to tears with the petulance of the Democrats. We were talking before the show on our backstage show is when Al Green comes in and starts brandishing a cane. You know, the lowest point of the history of the House of Representatives in that hall was during the Civil War, or just before the Civil War, I guess, when Southerner Preston Brooks caned Charles Sumner of Massachusetts nearly to death with a metal-headed cane. To see a man brandishing that cane like a weapon in a State of the Union address took me immediately back to the lowest point of decorum and respect, which is well over 100 years now. It's pushing 150. And that didn't look good. And holding up these little paddles that said false, and then when you flipped them over, that said Elon steals. This was the kind of thing you'd expect to see at a junior high game, junior high, junior varsity game. They're stuck. When the Democrats decided, not only as a somewhat rational political decision, but mostly out of emotional lack of control, when they decided that they hated Donald Trump so much that the entire Democratic strategy is to oppose Donald Trump at all costs, everywhere and at all times, you end up with the kind of things that Steve talked about and that you, in his episode that you talked about, where the Democrats will not stand for the boy with cancer, where the Democrats will not stand for a person who has been robbed, people who've been robbed of their father because of an assassin's bullet that was aimed at America, that bullet. And it puts them into a situation which is unwinnable, and I would feel a lot worse about it if I didn't think they were becoming such just un-American people. So Donald Trump comes out of this with tremendous optics and moments that people treasure and think of warmly. The Democrats come out of it looking like petulant children with holding up little placards, putting their fingers in their ears, and threatening somebody, with a cane. I don't know how it could have gone much better than that. But the last thing I'll say is that some of the people I talked to who are sort of on the inside of this are saying the Donald Trump team is not sitting there thinking we've got 4 years to do this. They're saying we have 18 months to do this. We have to get everything done before the run-up to the 2026 midterm elections. And they are moving with a purpose. And I know I speak for you and Steve when I say that, and all the rest of the conservatives that I've ever spoken to since the inauguration, that we've never seen anything like it, that this is beyond our wildest dreams, and that what Donald Trump accomplished during the State of the Union was to remind people of the overarching purpose for this blitzkrieg of activity, and that is to deconstruct the federal government, get it to fit in the box it came in, and give it back to the American people who it belongs to.
Bill, let me just add that I knew something was really off when the Sergeant at Arms and his team escorted Representative Green out of the hall, and I noticed the cane because Representative Green was not using it to walk. He was holding it midway down with
Yes,
that
as
kind
a
of
weapon.
gold-colored head.
I
I
didn't
thought-
catch that.
It's
Oh.
one thing to see a man who needs a little help walking leaning on a cane. It's another to see a man walking out holding the cane at the midpoint and having
And
it
bring
kind of-
and bringing it in as a weapon, basically.
Yeah, and
the
my
one he
immediate thought
waved
was-
at the president.
My immediate thought was, how did security let that man in with that? But I guess you get privilege.
Well,
when
I'm
you're a
thinking of
member the House.
Gandalf showing up at
Yeah.
Rohan.
Yeah.
Or the Avengers. Maybe he's gonna pull the top off, and there'll be like a rapier inside or something like. I mean, for God's sakes, man, you look like a complete idiot, and you did not do the country any favors.
Well, here's the note that I made to self as I was watching this speech, and I'll end with this here, and it's brief. I just said this. It was a visionary speech, anchored in history and personal story, coursing with a positive sense of momentum, glowing with the promise of a strong, free, safe, and prosperous future, with derision only for those who cling to the past, who cling to government domination, waste, fraud, and abuse, and to dark cynicism about our values and history. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.